I wanted to talk a little bit about um, Galatians 1:10 specifically. Actually going to be starting a study through that and just go through that book. If anybody has any ideas or anything about what they would like me to cover, I'm open to it, but otherwise I'm just going to keep rolling with these plans that I have and talk about things that I'm discovering in my own personal devotion time or Bible study. So Galatians kicks off and Paul greets the Galatians, and then he kind of gets on to them a little bit. He says, it astonishes me how quickly you're able to turn away from what you've been taught about the gospel. And he goes on to talk about how if anybody shares a different gospel than the one about who Jesus is, than Christ crucified and risen, it's a false gospel. And more than that, if anybody's teaching anything other than that as the gospel or as the gospel, then let him be accursed, let him be condemned. That's some strong language, and you're like, well, whoa, Paul, where's the compassion? Where's the grace? Here's the thing, here's the difference, and I feel like this is happening in our own world right now with everything going on. Everybody's got opinions, everybody has a stance or a position or whatever, and ultimately we have to decide, do we take that stance because of who God is in our lives, the convictions that we have based on his word or based on knowing how he wants us to treat people or to honor him? Or are we doing that because we agree with this side or this stance or this position or this person? And I think that's something that we all just need to evaluate. I'm going to leave that question there because I really don't know the answer for everybody. And maybe you think you have the right answer. I would just ask you to explore it and really evaluate it a little bit deeper. But he says this in verse 10. He says, am I trying to please or appease God or man? Or am I trying to please man? If I was trying to please man, then I wouldn't be a servant of Christ. That's a really hard thing to do, and I'll just be really honest for myself about this. It's hard to please God. Sometimes it's hard to want to please God, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think most of us probably feel that way, depending on what's going on in our lives. But I want to please God more than man, if that makes sense. So, how do we do that? Well, Paul continues and he says, the gospel that I'm speaking to you is not a gospel from man. It's from God himself. The truth of the gospel, the good and the bad, what's wrong with us, what's right with God, and how he can make us right with him. All of that comes from him. And it starts with that relationship with Jesus. That's what's so vital. That's what's so wonderful about the true gospel, the gospel of Christ, the good news of Jesus, is that we get to have a relationship with God through Christ. And yet we don't always act like or treat it as a relationship. When I spend time with my wife, the more I spend time with her and the more I want to be near her or with her, it's because of the relationship that I have with her. It's because of that foundation. It's because I continue to get to know her. It's because I'm comfortable with her. It's because I'm familiar with who she is. And so there are things that I do that are in order to please her, to make her happy, or to provide for her, or whatever. My kids the same way. The more that I'm around my kids, the more I want to do good things for my kids, the more that I want to be generous, the more that I want to bless them. Obviously they're kids, so sometimes the more I want to punish them. But only as consequences so that I can put them back on the right path, right? Because not only have I been entrusted with them, but I'm familiar with them, I'm comfortable with them, and I want what's best for them. Now, God's perfect. We have no reason to try to give God consequences or punish him or anything like that. But we should have a heart to please him. And the only way that happens is if our relationship with him is close. If we're drawing near to God, which I talked about a little bit a few weeks ago. If we're drawing near to God, if we're spending time in his word, if we're praying, if we make him our primary goal, our purpose in life is to pursue what he has given us to do, the commission, the commands, to live life according to how God wants us to live, then absolutely we're going to seek to please God above man. But if we're spending more time in this world, with the things of this world, desiring this world, I don't know that we can so easily answer the question the way that Paul did. The gospel is too good to keep to ourselves. And if it's really going to be effective, we've got to put aside our own concerns, our own desires, even our own positions or stances on certain things, how we feel. We have to put away the worry of what other people are going to think about us because of where we stand with God, and our willingness to be bold about the gospel. If we can do that, then we'll have the same kind of effect that Paul and his crew had in Acts, where they were accused of turning the world upside down. If you go read that story, it's not because it was a positive thing by the ones that were accusing them of doing that. They were saying it as a negative thing, but man, can you just imagine the impact that we could have if we were willing to set aside what other people think about us and focus on what God wants of us. The only way it's going to happen is if your relationship with him is as deep and as close as it can possibly be. God bless.